headlines. Pressure is applied on President Park Geun-hye by the opposition party to reconsider some of her cabinet nominations. Korean stocks react to Portuguese bank concerns and renewed fears of another European debt crisis, with the benchmark KOSPI shedding 0.7%. And the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon calls for restraint from both Israel and the Hamas leadership in Gaza, saying the region cannot afford another all-out war. Hello and welcome to the show. Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. President Park Geun-hye has secured a bipartisan agreement for passage of key reform and economy-related bills, but the opposition party has asked that the president reconsider some of her cabinet nominations. Choi-sun reports.
President Park has often been criticized for her lack of dialogue and communication with the opposition party. She countered that criticism this week by meeting with the ruling and opposition parties' floor leadership for the very first time.
The president and both parties' floor leaders met for talks, and the fact that we are going to meet on a regular basis means we are restoring politics.
A major development from Thursday's talks was an agreement to pass within the month a bill designed to prevent the repeat of tragedies like April's deadly ferry accident.
The policy chiefs of the two parties will start negotiating the bill within the standing committees, with an aim to pass this special legislation on the Sewol-ho ferry in the July 16th plenary session.
The ruling and opposition sides also agreed to seek passage of the government's post-ferry disaster reform bills and bills aimed at revitalizing the economy in August. But with 5 of President Park's 8 cabinet nominees confirmed by the parliament, the opposition has specifically requested the president reconsider 2 of the 3 remaining nominees for their alleged thesis plagiarism and false testimony. Although the president can appoint her cabinet without parliamentary confirmation, there's a big political risk if she goes ahead without considering the opposition's request. President Park also has to think about how her decision could affect public sentiment ahead of the July 30th by-elections. On the other hand, the president cannot afford any further delays in her government and public sector reform plans after her 2 failed prime minister nominations. Choi-sun, ARIRANG News.
Korean lawmakers on this Friday took aim at Japan's recent moves to expand its military role in the region. The National Assembly's Foreign Affairs Committee unanimously passed a resolution that condemns Tokyo's decision to exercise its right to collective self-defense, labeling it a provocative act and warning it could seriously undermine peace and stability in Northeast Asia. Earlier this month, the Japanese cabinet approved a new interpretation of its pacifist constitution that to allow Japan to come to the aid of its ally under attack. The annual U.S.-China talks concluded Thursday in Beijing without much headway on a range of security and economic issues, but there was one issue that these 2 superpowers saw eye to eye with each other, and that is North Korea's denuclearization. Ji Myung-gil tells us more.
The U.S. and China promised closer cooperation on denuclearizing North Korea at the 6th round of U.S.-China strategic and economic dialogue. The U.S. says China shares the same strategic goal and that Beijing must use its unique role to persuade Pyongyang to give up its nuclear ambitions. However, the U.S. State Department declined to comment on whether Washington and Beijing had agreed to enforce sanctions on North Korea more rigorously.
China has been an important partner in the implementation of sanctions, and even as recently as last year, they took a number of important steps.
China's top diplomat Yang Jiechi said Washington and Beijing reaffirmed the importance of realizing the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula through consultations, and that 2 countries can do more to relax the situation. During a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said both Washington and Beijing agreed to work harder.
But I do want to emphasize that we reached agreement that we need to both do more, and we are prepared to, in order to try to move North Korea on the subject of its denuclearization.
South Korea and the U.S. have long called on China, North Korea's only major ally, to play a greater role in urging North Korea to demonstrate its willingness to give up its nuclear weapons as a precursor to the resumption of denuclearization talks. But experts say Beijing has still been more accommodating toward Pyongyang. Still, there is a growing consensus among the Chinese leadership that the country needs to change its policies towards North Korea, even taking a harder line as Pyongyang has begun interfering with China's interest in the region. Kim Young-gil, ARIRANG News.
South Korea has made a counter-proposal to the North to meet next Thursday to discuss issues related to the upcoming Incheon Asian Games. This in response to North Korea's earlier offer to hold working-level talks on Tuesday. Pyongyang has asked to discuss its plans to send athletes and a cheering squad to the upcoming sporting event. If the North Korean cheering squad were to participate in the Incheon Asian Games, it would be a first in 9 years. Portugal's largest bank has run into some trouble. Reports of a missed debt payment sent shockwaves across the markets worldwide on Thursday and Friday, raising fears that the effect could end up bogging down Europe's already sluggish recovery. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Stock markets in the United States and Europe tumbled on Thursday. Markets in Europe dropped across the board, while Wall Street recovered most of its nerve at the opening of trading, with the Dow, Nasdaq, and the S&P 500 losing around 0.5%. The tension stemmed from the fall of Portugal's largest bank, the Banco Espírito Santo. The institution allegedly missed a debt payment this week and was held responsible for accounting irregularities. With the unstable pace of economic recovery in Europe, analysts say the shock in global stock markets shows that investors are worried about the overall financial health of the region. It's also raising fears that Portugal might face a crisis again, just about a month after emerging from a bailout. Portugal's regulator halted trading at the troubled bank after its share price dumped 17%. The Portuguese government insists that its biggest bank is solid and that the only trouble is at its parent company. Investors, however, remain skeptical. They say they've heard such reassurances before and that the scale of the problem remains unclear. Stock markets in Asia also slid on the news out of Portugal. The Nikkei dropped more than 30% to around 15,200.
Right now, it looks more like a regional crisis than an international one, like in the case of Greece in 2011. The Portuguese government has some room to respond to resolve the situation. Still, it's likely to affect the Korean stock markets until early next week.
The nation's benchmark KOSPI fell more than 14 points to close out the week at 1,988. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
World Population Day is marked around the world on this Friday, July 11th, but data shows Korea faces a bleak future in this regard. A study by the Korea Institute for Industrial Economics and Trade shows Korea's competitiveness will soon begin to wane due to the shrinking number of economically active people due to the fast aging population and low birth rate. It says Korea will fall into the lower ranks of OECD countries in 16 years. Korea's competitiveness through population is expected to fall to 21st place by the year 2030 from number 17 in 2010. Hyundai Heavy Industries has won a $2 billion project in the United Arab Emirates. Under the terms of the deal, the Ulsan city-based firm will build offshore oil production facilities in Nasser, 130 kilometers northwest of Abu Dhabi. The project includes engineering, procurement, and construction work, all of which is due to be completed by the second half of 2019. Once finished, the oil production capacity of that offshore field will nearly triple to 65,000 barrels a day. Another science fiction fixture has become a reality. Korea's LG Display, the flat screen maker of LG Group, has unveiled an 18-inch flexible OLED panel. The panel can be rolled into a cylinder with a radius of 3 centimeters without affecting its functionality. The display maker also revealed a transparent OLED panel of the same size with a transmittance of 30%. LG plans to develop both transparent and bendable panels of more than 60 inches by 2017 in a bid to lead this race in the display market. The U.S. has offered to help negotiate a truce between Israel and the Palestinians as violence between the two sides escalates. At least 95 Palestinians have been reported dead and hundreds injured. And U.S. President Barack Obama has told Israeli leaders that the U.S. is ready to broker a ceasefire. And for more on this story, we are now joined by Paul Lee at the News Center. Take it away, Paul.
World leaders, including Obama, are calling for restraint as Israel's offensive against Hamas enters a fourth day of bloodshed. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon had earlier appealed for a ceasefire between battling Israelis and the Palestinian militants, while calling on the Security Council to take action before the situation spirals into a full-blown war. Our Kwon So-wha has more.
The U.S. says it's willing to broker a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The White House said U.S. President Barack Obama told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the phone Thursday that he's ready to help end the escalating hostilities on the Gaza Strip. He also reiterated that Israel has the right to defend itself against Palestinians' rocket attacks. Secretary of State John Kerry spoke to his Egyptian counterparts, trying to make him use Egypt's influence in easing the situation, as the country played an important role in brokering an Israel-Hamas ceasefire 2 years ago. The surge in rocket fire was triggered amid an Israeli crackdown on Hamas members, which began after the abduction and killing of 3 Israeli teenagers last month. A suspected revenge murder of a Palestinian teenager followed a few days later. Hamas has reportedly launched over 550 rockets into civilian areas in Israel. Israel responded with over 500 airstrikes, part of their Operation Protective Edge, launched earlier in the week. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon made a passionate appeal for a ceasefire during an emergency session, saying Gaza was on a knife edge.
Today, we face the risk of an all-out escalation in Israel and Gaza, with the threat of a ground offensive still palpable and preventable only if Hamas stops rocket firing.
The UN chief called on the international community to work with Israeli and Palestinian leaders to stop the situation from escalating and said the region cannot afford another full-blown war. Kwon So-wha, ARIRANG News.
And Paula, turning now to Japan, where the economy minister there is calling on the country's central bank to put the brakes on a plan to scale back its stimulus measures. What prompted this warning?
Well, Minister Akira Amadi says such talk is premature as the economy has only just begun recovering.
I think it's still too early for the Bank of Japan to start talking about an exit strategy or tapering, like we've seen in the United States. We're still trying to completely get out of deflation, so I think those discussions are a bit premature.
On the other side, the BOJ warns that its so-called quantitative easing measures have brought on rising consumer inflation, which they say will hit 2% by 2016. Amadi admits inflation has been accelerating steadily, but said it's too early to declare that Japan is out of the woods. The Japanese economy has been showing signs of recovery since Prime Minister Shinzo Abe took office a year and a half ago, vowing to generate sustainable growth through major public works projects, cutting taxes, and economic reforms.
And heading now to Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel has ordered a top U.S. intelligence official to be thrown out of the country over allegations that the U.S. planted agents to spy on the German government. Germany is one of America's closest European allies, and this certainly puts that alliance to the test.
That's right. The scandal has chilled bilateral relations with Washington to levels not seen since Merkel's predecessor opposed a U.S. invasion to Iraq in 2003. In a dramatic display of rising tensions, the German government reportedly ordered the CIA's Berlin station chief to leave or be forcibly expelled. The move comes as Berlin discovered a suspected U.S. spy in its own defense ministry days after a German foreign intelligence worker was detained on suspicions he too was a CIA informant. In her most pointed words on the issue yet, Chancellor Angela Merkel called spying on allies a waste of energy.
The federal prosecutor general is still looking into this case. But if what we hear right now is true, I have to say that spying on allies is a waste of energy in the end. We have so many problems. Just look at the challenges posed in Syria regarding ISIL. If you look at the fight against terrorism, there are huge problems.
U.S. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki declined to make a statement on the incident, but emphasized that the U.S.-German relationship was extremely important.
I see. Now, here's another story on potential breach of trust. Chinese hackers have reportedly broke into and stolen data from a high-level U.S. government network. What kind of sensitive information are we talking about?
Well, according to the New York Times, the hackers who were traced back to China were trying to harvest the personal data of tens of thousands of U.S. federal employees with top security clearances. The Times article cited top U.S. officials who said a database connected to the Office of Personnel Management was targeted in the cyber attack. The report, confirmed by Homeland Security officials, said the breach attempt happened in March, though it's unclear whether any information was stolen and whether the Chinese government was involved. The news broke as U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry was in Beijing for bilateral talks that thawed tense relations over cybersecurity. Beijing's Foreign Ministry spokesman Hong Lei said the allegations were part of what he called an irresponsible smear campaign against China. Chetty?
All right, Paul, thank you very much for that update, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chae-ri for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. Starbucks customers in Korea will have to dig a little deeper in their pockets to pay for their cup of joe starting next week. Starbucks Korea says it's raising the prices on more than half of its coffee items starting next Wednesday by about 200 won, or roughly 20 cents. The company says the hike, the first in more than 2 years, is necessary to offset spikes in rent and labor costs. Other major coffee franchises in Korea, though, they say they have no immediate plans to raise their prices. If you've ever flown into Korea from abroad, you're probably familiar with Incheon International Airport. Now, city officials are out to show the world that Incheon is more than just an aviation stopover. Our Park Geun-hye explains how they plan to transform this city into a global hub for medical tourism.
This is Incheon International Airport, Korea's main gateway, where hundreds, thousands of people from all over the globe come and go every day. The airport consistently ranks among the best in the world, but the city of Incheon has much more to offer to these global citizens than a great airport. It hopes to bring more patients to the city's state-of-the-art medical centers. Just 30 minutes from the airport, dozens of hospitals and clinics have expanded their services to provide medical treatments for international patients. International St. Mary's Hospital, for example, a 20-minute drive from the airport, offers medical services in English for expats and foreign visitors.
It's very clean, very new, and we got excellent equipment.
Visiting this hospital, I was very impressed, and everything is awesome. I've looked at some of the equipment you have, and it is state-of-the-art.
Incheon's accessibility is an added incentive for foreigners seeking medical care.
Incheon has great accessibility via its airport, which serves around 40 million people a year, and its port, which carries about 2 million people a year. The city is registered as a WHO health city, and we are able to provide medical services just an hour after a person arrives at either the airport or the port.
These hospitals can be accessed directly from the airport via shuttles at the airport's Medical Tourism Information Desk. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
The World Cup in Brazil reaches its climax this weekend with Sunday's final. Now, no one ever expected Korea to still be in it, but everyone hoped that they will put in a stronger showing than they actually did. Now, head coach Hong Myung-bo has stepped down to take responsibility, but the deep-rooted problems with Korean football remain. Song Ji-sun has more.
Someone had to take responsibility, and this time, it was two people who withdrew from their positions. The vice president of the Korea Football Association stepped down on Thursday, along with head coach Hong Myung-bo. The seat is empty for now, but it won't be an easy position to fill. 10 managers have held the highly coveted seat over the past dozen years, after Gus Hiddink led the Korean squad to a 4th-place finish at the 2002 Korea-Japan World Cup. But each has only stayed for slightly over an year on average, after one or more losses in international matches that brought them under fire. Selection of the national team coach has generally been a top-down decision from Korea's Football Association. Its technical committee must provide professional insight to the process, but lacks the authority to influence the decision-making process. Now, the incumbent president of Korea's football governing body says that will change.
We plan to reform the technical committee so the team can perform better on the international stage. We'll also restructure all levels of the organization so that it better caters to the national squad's needs.
Those reforms and the selection of the candidates for national team coach must take place soon, with the next international match set for September and the Asian Cup in January just 6 months away. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
Time now to get a check on the weather with our Kim Bo-kyung. Now, Bo-kyung, please tell me the weather is going to cool off a bit over this weekend.
Well, things should cool off a bit, but it won't be much as daytime highs will continue to remain at around 30 degrees. At the moment, we are seeing mostly clear skies, but those in Jeju are getting showers from time to time. There's news of monsoon rain down south over the weekend, and no worries as it won't be much. So overall, this weekend looks to be a good chance to head out to the pool or to the beach. Other than that, a heat wave warning continues to be in effect for Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces, as well as Daegu. Taking a look at Saturday's readings, Daegu soars to 33, while Gwangju and Busan hit 29. As for other regions, Jeju and Dokdo make it to the mid-20s, Mount Kumgang to 31. Last but not least, ending off with World Cup weather, the Worldwide Soccer Festival is almost coming to an end with just the match for finals and 3rd place set to take place in Brasilia and Rio. Weather in those regions look to be so far so good. Hope you have a wonderful Friday evening, and we leave you with the international weather.
And that does it for this edition of ARIRANG News. Thanks for watching.